Welcome to the Hustle or Bust podcast powered by Paver Art. Our mission is simple: to dive deep into the world of entrepreneurship, small business, and all the success, struggle, and challenges that need to be confronted in the pursuit of growth. We celebrate the entrepreneurial spirit, but perhaps most important, we want you to learn at least one idea that you can put into action immediately to make your investment in time worthwhile. Is there any more emotionally charged topic with more opinions and judgment being bantered about than work-life balance? Probably not. So we dive into this subject in episode 12. We started talking about this yesterday on one of our many drive home discussions. We probably get more done between us on the long commute home and occasionally on the commute in, per minute, per capita, than we might do during the day when we're actually here. But as I recall, we both got a little passionate about this subject. And I know why I'm passionate. I want to know why you're passionate.
About work-life balance or the topic?
Work-life balance for an entrepreneur starting a business or coming into a business where all the responsibility falls on your shoulders, and you've come into a situation where you see tremendous potential that's not being realized currently. So it's almost like starting a business from scratch. Mm-hmm. Can you talk to that? Your work-life balance.
It's an emotionally charged topic, work-life balance.
Amen to that.
Maybe we define what it is first. I mean, I guess there's a couple ways to look at this or talk about the topic. What do you think the general thinking is of work-life balance if it were to be defined by the average person? What comes to your mind? How would they define work-life balance?
The saying that I come across most when I've talked about this subject outside of work with friends and family: you work hard and you play hard. Mm-hmm. Okay. That would seem to mean that as hard as you work, you spend as much time and as much intensity in your free time, mm-hmm. Your life outside of your job. That's what I see that as.
Yeah, I think it's
now, I could be dead wrong about that, but that's what that's the impression.
That's as good as any. I think the other one, the quantitative way, is a 40-hour work week, right? Mm-hmm. Generally speaking, I don't know if the 40-hour work week exists, but that's probably the start of it. How much more than the 40-hour work week? So I don't know if it's 12 hours a day times 5 days, 60 hours. That's the limit, and then you go over that, you're not having a work-life balance. But that's a more black and white way to measure work-life balance. Mm-hmm. Here's why I think the topic is emotionally charged. I think there's a high degree of judgment in what someone considers. In my mind, work-life balance is what you decide it is. It's what I decide it is. It's not for somebody else to make judgment on how I'm working or playing, mm-hmm. or balancing it with family.
Sure.
It's my fucking decision.
Yeah.
Work-life balance. This probably more than any other topic is an emotionally charged, judgmental topic that outside people, that could be family, it could be friends, it could be neighbors, it could be colleagues, want to cast upon their opinion on your work-life balance and how you're managing your work life. Mm-hmm. It ain't their role. It could be. But this topic more than any others, there's a lot of judgment cast upon how do you work and are you managing it appropriately.
Exactly.
I don't think it's their role to render an opinion. It's up to you as the individual. That's what capitalism is. It's an individualistic society that says, here's what I want to accomplish in life. I want to work 9 to 5, which is great. I want to go home. I want to bring little Johnny to a soccer game, Julie to her dance recital, and that to me is a successful life. If I only make 2% more a year, then that's great. I'm happy. That's great. This guy over here or this gal might want to start a business, and they're going to have to work 70 hours a week. They're going to have to make sacrifices for that because they're going to pursue different objectives. In my opinion, that's great. I don't give a shit if she's going to work 70 hours a week, 40 hours a week, or none at all. Mm-hmm. It's their choice. So I think work-life balance has been a very judgmental topic where people weigh in on other people's decisions that they make for themselves. I don't think it's any of their freaking business if I work 70 hours a week or if I work 7. You do your thing. You do you. I'll do me. How about that? This topic has generally it's bled into all kinds of things. Somewhat rightfully so as it relates to kids and raising kids in society. But last I checked, my parents, who grew up in, 50s, 60s, they had choices to make. They did it. I don't know if work-life balance is a topic. Was this as passionate topic in the 50s as it is today, work-life balance?
I don't believe so.
I don't think so either.
And I use my reason for saying that is to, again, go back to my parents. My father worked ridiculous hours. Mm-hmm. My mother took responsibilities for 4 kids and raised us. My dad was there too, occasionally, but his involvement in the businesses that he was involved with, especially one that, again, started from scratch. That's his involvement was 100%. And I'll get into how that affects us here.
Or business or
for the business.
Oh, business. Okay.
It was we weren't second shift in our family. He didn't treat us that way, and he never the time that he was able to spend with us was good time, and I remember that. But if I wanted my father to be a full-time father, I was going to have to work for my father.
Right.
And that's what I did.
Right.
That's exactly what I did.
Mm-hmm.
And it was 20 of the best years of my life, my work life, and involved with a startup. I learned what startups were all about from all of that. But I saw his commitment every day, 6 days, sometimes 7 days a week. That's what I understand it to be. So at any rate, but in your particular case, and again, some of this goes back to our wives. We've got partners in this, mm-hmm. Okay, and our wives understood what needed to be done on the home front in order for us to be able to work what we had to work. What kind of hours were you working? When you took over the L&M Foods situation, when you bought that business.
Pretty. Not much different than any other job I've had.
Mm-hmm.
So, if I were to look at my career, it's funny, when Dominic and I were redoing Hustle or Bust, the front page,
sure,
I had a graphic that kind of illustrated graphically with logos all the companies I've worked at. So the first cut at doing it, and I'm just copying and pasting from the internet and putting it in a PowerPoint slide, and all right, there was Kraft, and then there was Sara Lee, and then there was Catalina Marketing, and then there was this little startup nobody ever heard of called Monogram Foods, and there was this little company even fewer people knew about, LM Foods, and then there was this thing called Paver Art, which I never knew what it was. So it started at the biggest food company in the world mm-hmm. at the time, went to micro as micro can get with Paver Art.
Sure.
And my graphic was like that. It was high to low, Kraft to Paver Art. And then I'm looking at it and I'm saying my career, which has been pretty consistent on how I've approached it. I'll answer your question in a second. I've got Kraft at the top and Paver Art at the bottom. It really should be the other way around. I started at Kraft. That was my foundation. Mm-hmm. And then the path goes up and to the right. So it was Kraft. And then I left for a smaller role, more responsibility. And then went back home to New Jersey to work for Catalina Marketing. Went across the country, went pretty far away to Memphis, Tennessee to go to a startup. And then we grew it to a nice number. It's over $1 billion today. And then went to go buy a company. It got progressively smaller. But the right way to think about that is the progression of my career was up and to the right, even though the size of the company was dramatically smaller on each progression, each
sure.
transition.
Exactly.
So how did I work at each one of those companies? Pretty consistent. I was hardcore. At least 12 hours a day, mm-hmm. 5 days a week. And where I got better, to be Gladwellian about this, my 10,000 hours was not 60 hours a week. It was the 8 hours on the weekend or the 10 hours on the weekend, 5 on Saturday, 5 on Sunday. That's when I was getting better at my craft. That was the defined practice that Gladwell talks about. The 60 hours a week was maybe average or better than average in terms of how I was performing at each one of my jobs.
Sure.
The 10 hours on the weekend was where I got better. I got intentionally better. I was studying. I was planning. The phones weren't ringing. And that was my defined practice on the weekend. And that's been pretty consistent throughout my career. So I would say, if I were to say hour-wise, probably an average of 60 hours a week, 5 days a week, and then defined practice on the weekends of at least 10 hours, something like that.
I know.
And by the way, I loved every minute of it. So I can tell you there was people judging me.
That's what I want to get into.
People judge me. Parents, family, friends. Now here's a reality. If you again, this discussion. If 100 random people in society were going to listen to this discussion, we're going to alienate 85% of them because they're not in that group.
Correct.
They don't want to be in that group.
Yeah, I know.
Again, hustle or bust is not meant to satisfy everybody. It's a very polarizing topic. It's that far end of the bell curve that aspires to grow. And not that our way is the right way, but it's a way. But it does appeal to 10 to 15%. So most of the people, randomly, are not going to be turned on by this conversation.
Another way of saying it, it's the right way for us. Mm-hmm. So, go on, please.
Right. Now, I do believe, because there are only so many hours in a week, especially if you sleep 8 hours a day, which I like to sleep 8 hours a day. So it's about how you use your 16 hours in a day effectively. Mm-hmm. So 12 hours a day during the week gives you whatever it is, 4 hours of expendable time. I don't believe there's room for more than maybe two things. So you got your work and your family. Mm-hmm. Maybe you can bleed in a friend or two, but you're not going to be going to the play every weekend with a different friend group. You're not going to be... Now, I was on a board of directors at a nonprofit. That was the first time I really tried to test this, right? Mm-hmm. So in Memphis, Tennessee, I was the treasurer of the Mid-South Down Syndrome Association, and I did it for, I want to say 5 years. Nonprofits, great experience. I would encourage anybody to do it. It's great skill building. It's great to give back to the community.
What was and by the way, let's revisit that. What's the name? What was the name of the organization again?
Oh, it was the DSAM, the Down Syndrome Association of Memphis and the Mid-South.
Gotcha.
So my daughter, Hope, she was born with Down syndrome, so we moved to Memphis, and in part they had better services than Jersey. Within a year of when we relocated to Memphis, I had the opportunity to join the board of directors of that nonprofit, and it was a great experience. But from a time standpoint, when you start volunteering for nonprofit organizations, if you want to give 1 hour a week, they'll take that. If you want to give 50 hours a week, they'll be glad to take that too. Mm-hmm. So that's the first organization I was really involved in that competed with my daytime job, with my family, and all the other things. So that really tested me.
And you're clearly a driven individual. If that, your involvement in that nonprofit organization, I'm sure you took that just as seriously, for obvious mm-hmm. reasons, from a working standpoint, as you did your job.
Right.
And that's people need to understand that. You don't throw something like that in there unless you're dead serious about what you're going to be doing, because you want to make a difference, number one. And number two, the only way you're going to do that is to throw yourself into that with the same energy and the same involvement as you do with your own job.
Look, it's a great...
And that has got to be tremendously taxing, physically, mentally, and psychologically. That's got to be tough.
It absolutely is. It's a great way to put it. If you have a type A personality, and which I'm a high D, severe urgency to get results to happen.
Sure.
It is a terrible combination if you want to be a passive investor in anything, right? So the investments that I've made where I'm, quote, passive have been mind-numbing for me. I'm generally a terrible investor because, especially if it's a company that I know how to run, a business, for me to sit back and watch an operator that might not be busting it drive a company into the ground, it's just a question of when, not if.
Yep.
And I got to sit back and be passive. In other words, that is a stressful situation for someone like me.
That's
because
where,
I'm not going to
That's
get
where the stress comes in.
So I am not independently wealthy where I can just pick a number, $1,000, $200,000, passively do it and watch an operator perform at a level that I think is a C-. Mm-hmm. And that's what you have to do as a passive investor. It doesn't mean you can't coach, prod, and cajole, but you're not going to get results done in the business world by having a conversation for 20 minutes with somebody on the phone and say, hey, have you considered this? And the operator's going to be like, yeah, no shit, Sherlock. Mm-hmm. Of course, it's about execution and grinding in a way that creates results. Me, as a passive investor, has been one giant fucking disaster because of how I'm wired personally. Now, it took me a lot of mistakes to figure this out. But if I've got to throw money in and watch an operator perform at a level that I know I can do better, then number one, I should be operating that business. But that's not my business. So anyway, so having self-awareness to know, to your point, if you're going to join a nonprofit, you got to kind of do it with the same energy or the same, whatever drives your satisfaction.
Or any serious endeavor
Or any serious endeavor. That's right.
outside of your life's work.
That's right. The other thing is, so, back to work, you got the work, you got the 60 hours a week, you're getting better on the weekend. So you've got choices then to make. Is it the extended family that comes into that circle for the remaining hours? There's still plenty of hours.
Sure.
But it's not like you've got another 100 hours to go invest in the theater, the friends, the vacation home. Those lists, it's not you got so many hours in a day. So I've generally, you can have work and family, but work life or work, family, friends, and something else, you got to mix them. You can have two, but you can't have four, I believe.
That's a very good point.
If you're going to go after that hardcore growth mentality in your business. And again, 85% of the people are not going to do that, which is perfectly okay. But that's not what this podcast, that's not what this mentality is about. This is about, like we talked about, high energy, devoted towards the right things, getting better at it over time in the pursuit of growth.
And I think it's important to point out there is a difference. There is a difference between first coming into a situation, whether you're starting something from scratch, starting a business from scratch, or whether you're coming into a situation where you're there to make improvements, you're there to see this grow, you're there to expedite the growth of this business from where it is now to quadruple, 5 times, 10 times more. There's a difference between coming in at that stage and 20 years down the road where you've been successful, you've established it, you've got more people in place that can take responsibilities that you assumed early on in the staking and starting of that business. I think that's important to point out. Mm-hmm. Work-life balance in most situations is really going to occur seriously when you become successful. And I'm not talking about the first big win. I'm talking about the first 50 big wins. Mm-hmm. Okay, you start to feel more comfortable. It's just the way you're wired. You can't. I think you put it very nicely. It's the front end of the bell curve. It's what percentage of people in the United States are genuine entrepreneurs or have an entrepreneurial spirit. It's very small. Mm-hmm. It's very, very small. And oh, by the way, this is not a political statement, but there's no representation of that. The only representation there is of those people is the ones that they make themselves. We're more concerned about so many other things when we should be concerned about the entrepreneur, and we should be trying to grow that. There are more people out there that have that in them, but don't have the, how do I get started? Where do I get into that? And they never get that opportunity. I'm sure there's more out there than what are actually realized at the end of the day. There's more entrepreneurs out there and a lot of people than what they actually realize.
Well, think about it.
And we don't draw that out.
We don't.
It's all. But anyway, that's a political discussion, I guess. That.
Well, let's say you've got a range of age from, let's just say 18 years old to 70, right? Mm-hmm. Let's call that a working career, 18 to 70 or 70, whatever you want it to be. But in terms of busting it, to your point about when do you really get work-life balance is when you're successful. Let's just define that as financial independence. Mm-hmm. My definition of financial independence is I've amassed enough assets and they can throw off income passively where I don't got to do anything to watch those investments, mm-hmm. and it covers my life expenses, right? So if my life expenses are $5,000 a month, if I've got investments that throw off $6,000 and I don't got to do anything to manage those investments, to me, that feels like financial independence there. Mm-hmm. Now, to get $6,000 of income or $10,000 of income from a pool of investments, you've got to amass some wealth.
Right.
Let's go back to the 18 to 75-year-old person, let's say, and work-life balance. In my opinion, at least this is how I manage my career, 18 or 20 years old to 40, you want to go wide open. You want to go as hardcore gets. Why? You probably, at least for 10 of those years, don't have kids. Right? Mm-hmm. And even when you have kids, I believe, and this is my opinion, from 0 to 7 years old, maybe 6 years old, Dominic doesn't remember when he was 0 to 6 when I was in Memphis, and every weekend I was 10 hours getting better at my craft away from the house. Mm-hmm. I don't think he remembers that. And maybe he does towards the tail end, but I doubt he remembers it. When he's 12, 13, 14 years old, I do think he'll remember when he's my age, looking back, that 3 days a week we walked home from Terrell Middle School, from the school to home. He'll remember that, I think. He won't remember when he was 6 years old and I'm every single weekend getting better at my craft on a weekend, I think. So 20 years old to 40, particularly when you don't have young kids, you want to go wide open. As if it's 60, 70 hours, fine, do it. Now, there's a lot of people going to be thinking, oh, what about your social life? Life is not about work. It's about, oh, I get it. I'm not talking to you. So again, the judgment.
Thank you.
I don't give a fuck about your judgment. So if you're going to criticize me for working 70 hours, like I give a shit, right? You do you. You do what you want to do. So this is an emotionally charged topic. By the way, if you think I've gotten criticized on my career for busting it 70 hours a week? Yeah, think. I'm not bitter, by the way. But I think in a career, you want to go hardcore, 0 to 40-ish, really hardcore. Then you start tapering back as you start. The rule of compound interest is amazing, and we give this chart and we show it to everybody that starts working that's young. $100 a month or $200 a month saved. You've got to have patience. You've got to let that sucker run for 30 years before you start to see compound returns start to earn more than what you're actually putting into it. But that takes. But you got to start early, right? Your career's the same way. You got to start going hardcore early, and then by the time you hit 40, if you've started to get better every single weekend with 10 hours a week, you will start to see outsized returns if you're good. Now, if you're not good and you're not talented, again, if I was doing 10,000 free throws a day or 10,000 hours in basketball, I'm not going anywhere. I wouldn't even make the high school varsity team. So there's only so much that work and effort will give you. You've got to find your talent that when you put that effort in, it's going to give you that outsized returns 10 years down the road.
Well,
I've got an opinion on work-life balance, obviously, like you do.
Yeah, I have gone through some of the same things that you have. I know my brother has, and I'm sure Mick did too. Again, we were fortunate that our spouses were very understanding, and we love them dearly for it. And we are still with them, okay, through all these years. I think the wars have strengthened our relationship. But the bottom line is there is no work-life balance when you are trying to start a business or come into a situation where significant improvement needs to be made, and there's a tremendous amount of involvement from you in order for that to happen.
Right.
And oh, by the way, one thing that is never brought up. True entrepreneurs, people who start businesses, are genuinely concerned about the people that help them get to whatever success they have. And those are the people, that's their employees. So in addition to the stress, if you want to call it that, the stress of expediting all those steps to become successful and make that business successful, you also have the other stress that there's people that work for you.
That's right.
Okay? That business goes out of business, there's people on the street.
Yeah, look.
Okay? This is serious stuff.
A great point.
So, if you're going to work, yes, first and foremost, you're doing it for the business. You want the business to be successful, because if the business is successful, everybody that works for the business is going to be successful. They're going to be able to buy cars. They're going to be able to get mortgages on their homes. They're going to be able to put their kids through school. They're going to lead. They're going to get a chance to lead a very nice standard of living it's just a bonus. It's just a wonderful thing to be able to have them get to.
Look, I think you bring up a great point. There's business owners, which are like 8% of society, and 92% are employees. There's a massive difference between signing the front of the check or the back of the check. The business owners have to sign the front of the check.
Before you go on, let's say that number again.
8%.
8%.
That's the business ownership rate in America.
Correct. 8%. It's a very, very small percentage.
Right. That's why 92% of the world is generally going to have a little bit of a hard time understanding this conversation. But if you are part of that 8%, you do have a fiduciary responsibility. You are responsible, especially if you've got employees. If you've got employees, you've got to watch the ship and make sure that you're protecting their paychecks, right? But it's not just that direct mouth that you're feeding from Johnny that works for you, or Sally. Sally's got a family, and they're counting on their paycheck too. So the fiduciary responsibility, that brings with it a burden. I don't view it as a burden. I view it as a responsibility, and I love that responsibility. But that alone, that you've got these other responsibilities, puts you in a different category that brings the stakes up. There's a lot of benefits and sexiness with entrepreneurship. The core is you've got a fiduciary responsibility to the people that are counting on you. Mm-hmm. You might have investors. They invested in you for a reason. They believe in you. You just can't mail it in and not mind the shop as it relates to their investment. That's their capital that you're playing with. Now, there's a lot of probably, I don't know the number, but of the 30 million small businesses, I don't know how many, what percentage have outside investment in them. But if I had to guess, maybe it's 25%, and then there's a lot of sole proprietors that don't have outside investments.
Yeah, no doubt.
We should probably know that number, but I think it's the minority, but it's a healthy number of people that have investments.
A big chunk of them we deal with here, and they're called contractors.
Right.
So,
and they're solo operators. They, exactly. But anyway, those are some of the dynamics of owning a business. Means that you've got a fiduciary responsibility to be hardcore and make sure you're running a successful business because there's people counting on you.
Sure.
If you bring in investors, it's not just the employees. Then you got investors. If you've got debt on your business, then you've got all these different stakeholders that you got to kind of manage. It's a pretty big responsibility. And again, I think the social media world does glamorize entrepreneurship, and we don't talk about that other side of it, which is what's the sacrifices you need to make in order to do it. Now, I happen to love all of that. I love being responsible for investors, for the employees, the payrolls, all of that. You really do have to love it. If 70 hours or 60 hours or 40 is a grind and it's not enjoyable, I can't imagine that being. And maybe you can be successful if you've got tailwinds and you've got the wind at your back, you got a killer product. But long term, are you going to be able to bust it? Probably not if you're not loving it. So you got to be good at it. If you're successful, you can find a way to be good at anything. Look, I didn't know what Surimi Seafood was. I didn't know what hardscaping was. So I believe you can jump into any situation and find a joy in it if you're successful and you learn the business and you do it. So it doesn't have to be a product that you know. But the process and the game of figuring out how to be successful has got to be part of the journey that you find great joy in, which I do.
If you've got... Look, we all have our other interests, okay, whatever those other interests might be. But and in many cases, we go after those interests hammer and tongs, just like we would do our businesses. But there's priorities here, okay? At the end of the day, I love being successful. I love the process to get there. I despise failure. I hate it. It's what would keep me up at nights. Okay, it's funny when we're talking about the the sacrifices that have to be made by those people who, well, for instance, there was a lot of sacrifices made to start Paver Art. All three of the guys that were involved with the startup of this business all had to make sacrifices of various types. One of the things that I'll tell you what my biggest de-stressing moments were, okay? Actually coming in and working on Saturdays and the occasional Sunday.
Why?
It's easy to explain, but it's hard to convey the feeling. Monday through Friday, when you're coming here, there's employees, there's management, there's managing that needs to be done. There's inventory responsibilities. There's phone calls. You have to handle the phones. You have to handle quotes. You have to write orders. You have to get stuff made and out the door. There's 1,000 and then moments from Monday through Friday. Saturday, no phones. Mm-hmm. One of the most enjoyable, and I will never forget this. Every time I would drive to, where we are now, up in Lindenwold, and where we were before, up in Pedricktown, that drive was one of my favorite things of the week. Mm-hmm. I got the music blasting because I know when I get here, I'm doing things for myself, right, that are ultimately for the business, but I'm not fighting the phones. I'm not having to deal with meetings with employees or anybody else. Just again, the whole managing of the business. I'm coming here it's quiet.
Well, what you're talking about is daily routine. Routines that allow you to unwind and get charged up for the day, right?
But on that Saturday, I get more work done in an 8 hour, in an 8 hour, if I'm here for 8 hours, I won't work 10 or 12 on that side. I'll only put in 8 because somebody's got to cut the grass.
Right.
Until my wife learned how to run the tractor, then she cut the grass. But there will be guys out there and gals out there that know what I'm talking about when I say this. That's an enjoyable part of the week for me. It's work,
right?
But it's an enjoyable work. And when you're done that day on Saturday, you look at what you've accomplished and you say to yourself, I'm ready to go Monday morning, first thing. Boom, I'm coming in charged up, okay? Whereas I remember when I was working for someone else, Sunday nights, it was, I got to go to work tomorrow morning.
Yep.
There's that little pain in the pit of your stomach around 6 o'clock Sunday night when you're saying to yourself, okay, I got to get to bed here in a couple hours. I couldn't wait to get to work on Monday.
Right.
I just couldn't wait to get to work on Monday here. Mm-hmm. It was just that way. My other little pet peeve, vacations. We all take vacations. Mm-hmm. Part of being in a family is whether you work or whatever you're doing, you got to take your family on a vacation. You just got to do that. Do you work on your vacations? The answer to that question is yes. Now, it may be a reduced period of time, but people don't like when they you need to take that time. That's your you need to get your life back together again. You de-stress and reconnect. Well, I'm sorry. That's bullshit. Mm-hmm. Okay. You do work on your vacations. Now, it's a smaller period of time, but you want to de-stress me? I go on vacation and there's a serious problem here at Paver Art. I'm not going to enjoy my vacation.
Right.
I'm sorry. I'm not wired that way, and I know a lot of guys that aren't wired that way. You're not wired that way. Right. Okay, my brother's not wired that way. Mick wasn't wired that way. And fixing that problem made that vacation that much more enjoyable. Mm-hmm. Okay, I have actually left vacations, gotten in my car, and driven to the office. Okay, but I'll do it early in the morning. Maybe I'll miss a breakfast, but I'm not going to miss 5 hours at the beach. I'll be back in time to hit the beach.
Right.
Okay. There's no sin in doing that. When you're in the position that we're in and decisions need to be made, you just can't put them on hold. The business doesn't stop running because you went on vacation. Yes, you should enjoy the vacation with your family. That's very, very important. But don't tell me that I should not be, calling in or taking a text or checking my emails every morning. You made a mention, we were talking about this yesterday. You talked about the 16 waking hours. Mm-hmm. If you take an hour of your day to do and get things right with your catch up on emails or whatever, right, the home office and all that, you still have 15 hours to enjoy yourself. And believe me, you've become de-stressed when you get that first hour out of the way, and you got the rest of the day to enjoy your family.
So the 1
and
hour,
I enjoy them a whole lot more.
That's right.
And they get 100% of my involvement when that's the case.
So that's a 1 hour investment to enjoy the 15 versus just going straight at the 16 and being stressed out throughout.
And you don't. That's exactly right. And you don't look at this like, well, it's only 1 week out of 52. Baloney. It's every week is important when every week's important when when your cash flow sucks. Mm-hmm. Every week's important when you're in the middle of a project, which, by the way, you push it back a week, could be catastrophic.
Could be your payroll.
It could be your payroll. That's
right.
Exactly right. And what's the one thing that I've always been proud of in my work life? Never, ever missed a payroll.
That's a huge accomplishment.
Never.
Yep.
Never. We never had to go to a bank and borrow money for payroll.
Yep.
Okay. Never had to tell the employees, "Can you give me another week?"
Right.
Or my brother never had to do that. Mick never had to do that.
Huge accomplishment.
It is. Well,
now it's not
accomplishment or not. The bottom line is that doesn't happen if you're not giving
right.
a huge percentage of your life to the business.
If I'm 30 years old, newly married, and let's just say I got a kid on the way, and I'm thinking about, and I put 10 years into my career, and I'm thinking about starting my own thing.
Sure.
And I'm listening to you talk about vacations and the commitment and making payroll, the stress, dealing with all that.
Oh,
what runs through my head for that person that might be, who's always wanted to start their own business?
And they're just on the, yeah.
And I hear this talk. What do you think? Him and their spouse, or her and her spouse, they're hearing this discussion.
I would tell the story of when I went to my wife, who was laying in bed the day that I came to her and said, look, I've got an opportunity here and I want to take advantage of it. And you need a partner in this. I'm sorry.
You can't go solo.
It's hard. It's hard to go by yourself. You need somebody to prop you up, but you need, especially when you have a family, you need your partner to say, we're going to make this work.
Let me push on that, because I agree with you.
Yeah.
If your partner is that militant one that says that hour on vacation, no. You're going to work 70 hours a week. You're going to give us the vacation solely. Then what?
We're going to have a problem.
Right.
I'm sorry.
It's not going to work.
We're going to have a problem. And I
don't go into the business.
That's a negative way to approach this, but it's, the truth is what the truth is. And, I can beg off and say I apologize and I'll make it up to you. At the end of the day, next vacation that comes is going to happen again.
Right.
And the one after that, and the
and
one after that,
and the one after that. Stress in
the
a relationship.
Exactly.
So something's got to give.
Well, I'll tell you what makes a lot of that go away is success.
Right.
Okay.
Work towards success where that doesn't become.
I find this interesting. There's rhythms to your work life. Okay. One of the rhythms is when you have, let's say you land a big deal, okay, and that's going to pay the next 3 payrolls, okay. You're not looking at whether or not you're putting that cash in your pocket.
Right.
You're going to make the next 3 payrolls because you landed
right.
a $75,000 job, okay. And let's say you landed. By the way, the best time to land that is Friday at 4 p.m. Okay,
that'll help
because
that'll help your work-life balance.
You still have 2 to 3 more hours left in your workday, and you get to go to your partners and make that tremendous announcement. And everybody walks out that door that day.
Yep.
Just on air. Man, this is going to be a great weekend.
Great feeling.
Yeah, until you show up the next day on Saturday.
Right.
Which is still a good feeling, but but what's amazing to me is my rhythms. I enjoy that for about 24 hours. And then that starts to dissipate. And when that starts to dissipate, you come back to the reality of what the next day is going to bring. You got to come back to the next day.
Right.
Okay. So, we've chalked that up. Boom. Big success here.
Yeah, no let up.
Let's go. All right, we got to get into the next big thing, okay? Or next series of medium-sized things or small things, whatever they might be. But my rhythms are, I'm good for 24 hours. Now, on the exact opposite of that, a big failure. A big failure lasts a hell of a lot longer than 24 hours, okay? You come to expect success. You never expect failure, but you know it's there. And if you're a salesperson, what I was taught was you're going to fail more than you'll succeed.
Significantly more.
Yeah. And you've got to learn to deal with that. Well, I got to tell you, you never deal with it. It's like this whole issue of work-life balance.
Right.
It's a myth. We said basically work-life balance, myth or reality. It's a myth.
So you come down on the myth side of the equation. Right.
And the sooner you understand that, and I'm sorry for the person that may listen to this and say, oh man, I don't know if I want to do that. Then it's not for you.
Right.
Okay. Again.
There's nothing wrong with that. I think the people that don't want to make that choice, that's perfectly fine. But then ownership or significant growth as an individual career aspirer might not be for them. Again, nothing wrong with that, but they are making. I think where the real stress comes in life is the people that want it all. They want to work 9 to 5, 40 hours a week, and yet they want to go up in their compensation 10% a year. They want to progress to higher levels.
Sure.
When there's other people, this is a competitive society. That's what capitalism is. If you choose to work 40 hours a week, no problem. There's no judgment against you. But you've got to temper your expectations then, that you're not going to be able to, you might not be able to compete with this young gun over here busting at 65 hours a week.
Sure.
You just, unless you're a genius and you've got so much more God-given capability than this guy over here doing 40 hours a week, it's going to be hard to keep up with that kid. It's just a simple math, right? Now, we can judge the 65-hour or the 40-hour all we want, but we're in a competitive society when it comes to promotions, career growth, owning that business, scaling a business. Typically, there's a link between the hustle mentality and the people that achieve those levels.
Sure.
That doesn't mean you can't have it all and balance it. I just haven't seen it.
Well,
Maybe I've got a limited scope, but I've been in businesses, consumer products, consumer packaged goods. Success is measured by pennies on the dollar. You're selling, in my previous world, we were selling things that cost $1.30 with a 65-person payroll or a 2,000-person payroll, selling things that success is literally measured. Are you going to make 6 cents or 8 cents? That's a tough business. Not a lot of room for error there, right? Retail's a tough business. Great retailers will make 5 cents on the bottom line.
Sure.
And average ones will make 1 cent, and there's a lot that lose money on retail. I mean, these are tough business. Your industry definitely determines a lot of how competitive it's going to be. And then all the people within that industry kind of fall within that mix. There's a lot of tech companies that I'm fascinated by these tech companies that have the foosball table, the big venture capital money in it,
the candy
the
bar,
work-life balance. Some are doing 4-day work weeks, the candy wall,
the candy bar.
I mean, that is amazing. You know what I find amazing is these. I still can't get my head around venture-backed tech startups that have $500,000 of revenue and they raise $10 million, and they're hiring and hiring and hiring. They wouldn't know a profit if it hit them over the fucking head, right? And then when they raise another round, the Series B, and they might raise $50 million, and then 3 weeks later they lay off 40 people. How can that founder? I can't get my head around a founder that is doing nothing but raising money, and then they raise money, and then they lay off 100 people. How do they? I mean, I don't know how they sleep with themselves raising all these venture money, and they have to, by the way, for that business model, because they got to protect their burn rate and all this. But it's a world that I haven't lived in that world, and I can't understand it. I'd have a hard time being CEO of a company where I'm raising millions of dollars, and then three months from now I'm laying off a third of the staff. It's just a crazy. I get that world because it's venture backed, but it's a difficult thing to get your head around.
It sounds. Look, many of those companies do move the line forward in regards to tech advances, and that's fine.
Your Gates story was interesting. His early days. Talk about that a little bit as it relates to work-life balance and all of that.
Here's a guy that, for all intents and purposes, buried himself at the University of Michigan at nights because that's when time was inexpensive and always available.
At 14 years old.
Yeah, and he did this for a number of years. That story to me tells me so much more about Bill Gates than the crap you see on the nightly news about Bill Gates. Well, he's thinking now about he's going to give his money away. There's people knocking at his door that want to be beneficiaries of that. He and his wife are getting a divorce. You're missing the point.
Right.
You're just missing the point. This guy gave you. This was more important than bread. Okay, what this guy gave you.
Right.
Period. What Steve Jobs gave you is more important than bread. It just is.
Right.
It's what he changed the makeup of this country, the world, not just this country, the world, the way we conduct business, the way we do things. What took us an hour to do during a work week, back in the 60s and 70s, and now takes us, a minute, minute and a half. It's revolutionary what these guys did. But when they got started, the amount of time that they invested in that at the expense of so much else, that's never talked about. Nobody, it's in books. You got to read the books,
right,
which takes an effort. but the amount of time and effort that they put into that. You think Bill Gates was looking at work-life balance, when he's got his peanut butter and jelly sandwich, and a Coke,
right?
And he's sitting at a computer, with computer time that he bought, with money that maybe his mother gave him so that he could get started on it.
At 2 a.m. When the college lab was closed down.
When it was closed down, exactly, and he convinced somebody to let him in. There's more to the story than that. And the same thing. Look at all the great entrepreneurs.
Gates is a disciple of the 10,000 hours. So when Gladwell was doing 10,000 hours, he's studying. Now, timing was also a factor. Gates was born at a time when the PC industry was just starting.
Exactly.
But then he's putting in at 13 years old his 10,000 hours in that computer lab at 2 a.m. when he can get the time. He invested in a market that was about to explode, but he got his 10,000 hours in. Yeah. And he did that over the course of 15, 20 years.
Yeah, definitely.
It changed the world by doing it.
Where do you get off complaining about how much he's worth?
Oh, God bless him.
He earned every penny of what he made.
Right.
And at any rate, I get a little emotional about this as well as passionate because, Paver Art, we're not as successful as Microsoft. We're not as successful as Apple. Of course not. We're not changing people's lives with Compass Roses, okay? But we are changing people's lives with Compass Roses. People get passionately involved with these items that they buy from us. And they're not inexpensive, and it takes time. There's an investment in time that's involved. These people are getting something that they actually participated in buying. They're not buying a sofa,
right,
from a local furniture supplier who's bringing it in from North Carolina. We have. You want to buy this? 3 colors. Black, white, and purple. Take your pick. Not at Paver Art.
Right.
That syndrome, that whole idea of who we are and what we are today didn't come about because, it's so I can give you 40 hours, but I need my time at home because I'm taking Italian lessons.
It wouldn't.
And I'm also learning how to play the guitar because I need to de-stress.
Well, guitar's good.
That's right. Don't say accordion. We're not going back to the accordion. But it's look. Family is what your life's all about. But what we do to support our families is also
right
what our families are all about. Okay. My wife made the same sacrifices that I did.
Right.
Worked ridiculous hours. Spent all kinds of time improving herself so that she can improve her position, in her job. A 40-hour week to my wife is as foreign as it is to me,
right,
as it is to you, as it is to Kim, your wife. And the, all the other responsibilities that needed to be done outside of, what I would be home for, she took care of. And oh, by the way, we get here at 6 o'clock in the morning. No, most people don't go to work at 6 o'clock in the morning. What's the reason we get here at 6 o'clock in the morning? So we can put in the amount of time that we need to put in, leave at a reasonable time, and get home at a time where we can still see our spouses for a couple of hours, okay, before we, go to bed.
Well, I think
to start the next day. And by the way, again, a little tip of the hat to my wife. In order to make her schedule work, she worked nights.
Mm-hmm.
She went and worked nights so that I could do what I was doing, with the business, and still have time for the kids. And the joke around my house and with my friends was our dog Junior, our yellow lab, slept with my wife more than I did. Okay. She's gonna scream at me for saying this, but it's the truth.
That's funny.
It's funny, but it makes a point.
Right.
Okay. I'm going to bed at night. She's working.
Right.
Okay.
But you approached it as a partnership. It wouldn't have worked if it was just one person.
We used to.
That's the key.
I refer to it as Bull Incorporated.
Absolutely.
And I will love her forever for that. But that kind of commitment is the kind of commitment that allows us to do what we do here.
Right.
Period. End of story. I don't want to hear anybody. I'm like, you really should. You should take some time for yourself. And what are some of the things that you like? I got to bring this up. I scanned the intra-web net or whatever, and I just punched in entrepreneurial work-life balance. And here's what I came up with. There's some interesting points.
On the Google?
That I would like on the Google.
On the Google?
On the Googler. If I can get you to comment on this. Challenge your beliefs about your availability. What the hell does that mean? Challenge your beliefs about your availability.
So I have 16 hours or don't I?
Delegate what you can. It's the, I've never considered myself the manager of the obvious
You were
department.
trying to find tips on entrepreneurial work-life balance?
Yes.
And the first one was what again?
Challenge your beliefs about your availability.
Well, I believe I got... So, interesting. I believe I got 16 hours a day. I don't think that's indisputable. Remember Paulie Walnuts? Rest in peace. Was it Tony Sirico? Hell is hot. That's never been disputed by anyone. I got 16 hours. That's not going to be disputed. So I just challenged it. All right, let's number 2.
Delegate what you can. Okay.
There's a skill there if you've got people to delegate to. There's some value there.
No, there is value there, but it's, if you're 20,
right,
that's pretty obvious.
Right.
Okay.
You might not
Delegate what you can.
Right.
Who was the genius that came up with that little point? that little bullet point. Take breaks early and often.
Take breaks. Okay.
This is the best the internet can come up with. Ignore activities not related to your goals. Now, ignore activities not related to your goals.
Well,
it all depends on what your damn goals are.
We talked about this in our time management pod, right?
Right. Oh, yeah. Exactly.
Goals are different than the whirlwind, right?
Yep.
The whirlwind's important. It keeps the lights on. When that phone rings, that might not be related to the 3 things on your list.
You're jumping back and forth between
right.
those 2 things all day long.
There is wisdom there, but the practicality is where the challenge is.
I won't make fun of that one.
Right. Yeah.
You're right.
That one makes the list.
That's right. Ignore activities not related to your goals.
Right.
I can agree with that. So this one, 2 words. Say no. And no is in quotation marks.
Right.
Say no. Really? Okay. Well,
there is. I'll defend that one too. If it's coming from outside forces not related to your business and/or what you determine your top 2 are. Agree.
I agree with that too.
If there's a cousin that's having a confirmation, last I checked, cousin's not your immediate family.
That's oh man. I didn't say that.
Look, these are
Mark. For those of you in the Alavito family, look, I have no comment.
I know. It's but it's up to the person and their partner to determine what those top 2 are, and then at what point does that circle start getting expanded as it relates to your availability.
Gotcha. And no, you're right. You're right. Stop letting email dictate your day. Well, I don't know about you, but although I'm not one of these people that's constantly looking at their phone and checking this out and looking at this, and email dictates your day. Sorry, that's a big part of your day. A big part of what we do.
It's communication.
And all kinds of triggers are pulled by the types of emails that you get during the day.
Right.
Okay. There's stressors all over the place.
There's some wisdom there, but I agree with you. It's ingrained.
You know what, Mark? I'm sorry.
Challenge your availability, Mark.
I'm gonna today.
We're shutting down the email.
I'm going to stop letting email dictate
this is
my
going to
day.
be a no email Thursday.
That's right. That's exactly right.
Let's just pray no one important emails.
And in 3 months, when I go to the employees and say, I'm sorry, but we're going to have to shut down. Yeah. Oh my God. Get the hell out of here.
The Googler's not doing too well right now.
Stop multitasking. That was my favorite one. Stop multitasking, which is basically, all right, you get this job done, and then you move on to the next job. Now, there's some wisdom in that.
There is.
Okay. But where the wisdom isn't for the small business entrepreneur is you cannot stop the phones, okay? And if you're in the middle of a task and the phone rings, well, I'm just going to let it go to voicemail. Okay, well, you just let a sale go right by the wayside. Yeah, stop multitasking. You got to multitask.
Right.
You got to multitask every day.
Yeah.
You know, the theory of and then never stops.
Right.
It never, ever, ever stops.
Yeah.
And at the basis of that is multitasking. And then my last bullet point, my favorite one. This is why the intraweb net thing is just so endlessly interesting to me. Don't work more than 40 hours a week.
Oh my God, that was on the list?
That was on the list. Don't work more than 40 hours a week. I'm trying to remember.
Oh my God.
And there will be people now. I will say this with all honesty.
Well, I guess
my family, everybody in my family, is a worker. We're worker bees. Okay, a 40-hour week in my family is very, very unusual. I don't know anybody that works a 40-hour. I mean, do you?
Look,
I mean, I know there's people out, but I'm talking about people that you personally know
there's
that
definitely
only work 40 hours a week.
Generally, no. But I'm trying to think, going through my mental Rolodex.
Sure.
The people that have jobs that are closest to it. Generally, that answer is no. The people that might they have normal conventional jobs. Mm-hmm. They're probably the closest to it, and they're happy with their jobs. They're making a great living. They're the closest. So yeah, I do. Now, look, there is a little. All right, don't work more than 40 hours a week. I've often preached in businesses that are trying to grow. People get into this fallacy of they have these limiting beliefs of or versus and, right? We can either run out full open on production, or we can take the time to train people. No, you got to do both, right? You can either figure out how to launch a podcast or maintain your customer service levels. Freaking do both. Mm-hmm. Why can't we do both, right? So I do think a little bit, there is an old school, new school thing here as it relates to work-life balance. My father, I think the older generations, my father was a great example. He worked 70 plus hours a week. He was working weekends. He loved what he did. Mm-hmm. And then progressively, I think as you go through the generations, the more intensity picked up on work-life balance. I don't know if you want to call that the new school, new generations, but there is a way to get better at it, I think. But I think I'm a pragmatist when it comes to if you really want to bust it and become successful and get ahead, generally the 40-hour work week, you can do that, I think. There's probably thousands of people in the tech world that are working 40 hours a week, making great livings, and in their own mind, their own definition of success, which is the only one that matters, they're successful. So there are ways that you can do that. But in our world of small business ownership, of trying to grow a small business, a small enterprise, it's not practical. Is it practical for workers that are in it? It is. But again, that's not generally who we're talking about. So to say work-life balance, just don't work more than 40 hours a week, go be an employee that's satisfied being an employee and satisfied with whatever the masses get. 2% raise, 3% raise. There's got to be trade-offs.
That's fine.
Nothing wrong with that.
Absolutely nothing wrong at all.
Again, if you have the spouse that's going to have a problem with the 1 hour day on vacation, you're going to have problems. You got to have complete alignment with your spouse, and then you got to decide what's important to you. If you want to achieve big things, and you got that goal to be 40 hours a week, something's going to give. Do the 40 hours a week. The one that's going to win is the 40 hours a week, I believe. So I think it's about all these goals are competing with each other.
Sure.
You got to determine what's important. And by the way, growth for growth's sake is not exactly a smart goal, right? I mean, I've worked at companies that grow and they don't create any more enduring value in the business. That's freaking crazy. So growth is an ego-driven thing if it's just growth for growth's sake, just to become bigger. Why are you trying to grow? In a small business, ours is simple. If we grow profitably, that's the case. So if we grow revenue 20%, if profit goes down 10%, what did we really accomplish? Right. Not much, because you can't invest more to create more people, to create better machinery. That's not smart growth. Smart growth is having excess cash flow to reinvest back in to create this virtuous cycle where everybody wins. The employees make more money. The balance sheet is stronger. You're now not worried about 3 weeks or 3 payrolls that you have in a bank. Mm-hmm. You've got 26 weeks in the bank. There's a whole host of things that benefit with smart, profitable growth. But none of it comes with 40 hours a week at the manager level, I don't think.
Well,
I haven't seen it at least.
I agree 100%. The whole idea of working a 40-hour week it's kind of foreign to me. It's just been that way for a very, 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 very long time. And I think one of the reasons for that is, there's no reason why you can't look at your work as also, in some small part, a hobby.
Well,
here's why. In some small part, it's also a hobby because I've become a better person because of this. I've learned things about myself that I would never have learned had I not gotten involved with this. There's and hobbies do that for you too. They expand your horizon. They expand your knowledge base. They get you connected to other parts of life that you wouldn't normally have gotten involved with. This business, this work, in some small part is also a hobby, and I'd love to be able to to learn how to play Stairway to Heaven.
Yeah, well,
okay?
now let me.
But that's not going to de-stress me.
At the risk of destroying the entire podcast that we just had, there's that old saying: on your deathbed, is anybody in the world going to say, "Boy, I wish I just worked an extra 5 hours a week for my entire career"?
Right. Well,
So there is that school of thought, right? And most people say, no, I wouldn't say that on my deathbed.
Right.
I wouldn't want that written on my tombstone, right? Mm-hmm. So there is truth to that. But I think this comes down to you've really got to be aligned with what you're doing. If you don't leave in a good way tired from the day, energized and excited to attach the next day, and you're just plodding through it, you're definitely in that camp of you never want to work. You shouldn't have worked another 30 hours a week.
Right.
Right? So if you're dreading your job and you're dreading Monday coming in, you are pissing your life away. I'm sorry. You're spending 2/3 of your waking hours on something that you hate or something that you just haven't found joy in.
It's a very good point.
So, and by the way, it's not the employer's responsibility to make sure you're happy at your job. It's your responsibility. This thing called the mirror test, I've always believed that work as a concept, I'm going to a job, I'm going to a business I own, whatever it is. If work doesn't add to the quality of your life, regardless of how long you're working, and it takes away from it, time to make a change. Time to recenter how you're viewing your job, your business, get a new one. But if that acid test doesn't check off that box, if it doesn't add to the quality of your life and it takes away from it, you've got a problem. You've got to fundamentally readdress it.
It's a better way of saying what I mentioned before. Mm-hmm. That's a really good way of saying it. And quite honestly, I think that's a good summing up point. Mm-hmm. I think I just need to pose the question to you again: work-life balance, myth or reality? You got to pick one.
If I had to pick one, I'd say myth.
In
the context of who we're talking to and what we're about, it's a myth.
I would say myth too. Mm-hmm. I would absolutely say myth, but we knew that going in.
we set the deck. Good
job, folks. Thank you for listening in. It's the Hustle or Bust podcast, and by the way, a tip of the hat and a nod to our producer, Dominic Olavito, who was referred to earlier in this when he was between the ages of 0 and 6, as I recall. That was one of your stories. At any rate, thanks very much. And don't forget to check us out on YouTube. And let's see, give me the list. Give me the list, Dominic. What are we on?
YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts.
YouTube, Spotify,
Stitcher.
Apple, Stitcher.
Tune in. Anywhere you find podcasts, you'll find us.
Anywhere where you find a fine podcast, you'll find Paper Art. And you'll find Hustle or Bust. But thank you very much. Have a great day, everybody.
Take care.